Hello, how are you doing?
I'm just doing a jigsaw at the minute.
Oh, a jigsaw, what kind?
None of your business.
Right.
What are you ringing at this house for?
Oh, I was just calling to see if you had the COVID vaccine yet.
No.
All right. No, it's just, I have a friend who has a podcast called the Japan Times Deep Dive, and he started his episode on this topic with a call to his nan. So I thought I'd do the same, but don't worry.
Hello, Oscar. I listen to his show. He's a nice young man.
You listen to the Japan Times Deep Dive?
Yeah, I listen to it.
Do you listen to my podcast?
Yeah, sometimes.
But you listen to Oscar's more?
Yeah. It's a well-produced show.
All right. Do you know when you'll get the vaccine?
No. I don't think I'm going to have it done.
Why?
Because I don't want Bill Gates knowing where I am.
Okay, Nan, I'm going to go now. Okay? This has been a complete waste of time. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. We want to start by thanking those who have supported us on buymeacoffee.com. Thank you very much, especially to those who have become members. Our new members are Olof Hellman, Brian in Seattle, who also just got his stickers yesterday, so thanks a lot, Olof.
Thank you to Brett, who wrote, came for the cruise, stayed for the river. This guy gets it.
Also, thanks to JJ Walsh, another previous guest who is a supporter. Thanks so much. She says, love the work you do and look forward to collaborating on projects again this year. By projects, we can only assume she means boat trips.
Well, she runs Seeking Sustainability Live, and I think she became a member because she can tell how desperately we seek to make this podcast sustainable. Also, thank you to Natasha, who bought us a coffee again. Thank you very much.
And also thanks to Kaz, Kansai and Beyond, Radley, Brian and Gina, who all bought a JBRC laptop sticker set. Send us a message on Twitter. We'd like to see what you've done with them.
And with that, we are officially sold out of our first ever JBRC merchandise. More to come in the near future. Right now, it's time for a message from our corporate sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by a meme of Bernie Sanders sitting on a Japanese riverboat. That's it. That's the advert. Can we have 20,000 likes now, please?
Hello, Brian, and welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo.
And I'm Ollie Horn.
And joining us this week is Lisa Du, Bloomberg journalist and heiress to the famed Hunan Yellow River Riverboat Trading Corporation fortune. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bobby. Very happy to be here.
On this week's show, you may have heard about the cultural reasons for Japan's resistance to COVID-19, but what about the cultural reasons for Japan's resistance to the COVID-19 vaccine? Quick disclaimer, the discussion in today's podcast does not constitute medical advice, and if you needed to be told that, you are an idiot.
Yes, that's right. If you want our medical advice, you should be listening to Bobby and Ollie's Medical Advice podcast, available on all good podcast platforms.
But for you River Cruise fans out there, as always, Ollie's got your weekly River Cruise recommendation. Ollie?
Yes. Well, Bobby, it's a boast of Disney fans the world over that due to the number of boats they operate, that Disney technically has the fourth largest navy in the world. Well, this week's recommendation is the temporary pop-up that Tokyo Disneyland have installed in the It's a Small World section, a River Cruise conversion that shows what happens if the characters were armed and they meant business.
Also, Japan's longest-running, carefully guarded Ninja River Cruise launches its first ever national ad campaign in an effort to stay afloat during the coronavirus tourism slump. The ad campaign has raised their visibility, but in doing so, has cost them their ninja license. More on that later, but first, Soap Talk.
Right, Bobby, before we get started, special announcement. In addition to Lisa, we also have another special guest with us this week, don't we?
That's right. We noticed that on Ishikawa Summit to Sea, a podcast that we claim to listen to, that we got called out last week for not ever having featured the original Brian. He was a guest on their show before he's ever appeared on our show. He is the original Brian. He is one of our most fervent and longest standing supporters. He holds the record for most coffees purchased on buymeacoffee.com.
On our page, that is. Not generally.
On our page, not in all the coffees. But Ishikawa Summit to Sea was correct. It has been a gross oversight on our part that he has not been on the show. We aim to correct that this evening. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And with that, Lisa, we know where you live. Not in a sinister way. We're going to send you some stickers. But you live a stone's throw away from one of my favourite parts of Tokyo, which is Good Heavens Bar, home of the comedy club.
Yeah, in Shimokitazawa.
Yeah, Shimokitazawa, which I regret to say, you've seen one of us perform comedy there. And regrettably, it's the less good of the two comedians. What a shame.
Yes. Well, I don't know. Actually, sorry. I'm not sure about to pass judgment on that. But I did see Bobby at Good Heavens maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was when I first moved here. And so the name is very particular, so I remembered it. And so when he contacted me, that was, of course, like, oh my God, give me your autograph.
Oh, cool. So it was a good show. It was one of the decent ones then. Did you come for a roast or just a regular open mic night or?
No, it wasn't like that memorable. But so that was sorry. What I just said was there was a slight bit tinge of sarcasm there, but it was not. I think it was kind of like one of those things where it was a roast. Actually, it was a roast.
If it was a roast, one of the funniest roast jokes that anyone's ever said about me is very, very relevant to what's happening right now. It was Bill Miller, and he said, Bobby's dad passed away from Alzheimer's, which is a shame because even to your own father, you were unmemorable.
Oh, God.
That's terrible.
But it's a great venue, though. It's such a great asset to Tokyo and the comedy scene there.
Ollie, why are we talking about stuff that is not important at all? We've got important stuff to talk about. Namely, we are literally inundated with a message that wants to know whether or not you still have a cat.
I still have the cat. The cat's called Mary, still. I kept that name. And I think I'm a cat person now. In fact, I think 4 or 5 times now watched the video, which is a meme from about a decade ago where a lady is singing a song. A lady is giving a dating profile video that's been made into a song where she goes, I love cats. I love every kind of cat. I just want to hug them all, but I can't hug every cat. And that's now how I feel.
I know exactly the video you're talking about.
Oh, man, it's me. I'm now, I'm watching, my YouTube recommendations is now all videos of, cats waking up, or, videos for cats of,
Oh, if that's the case, I have so many recommendations for you.
Oh, send them my way. This is all I want to hear about now.
I am a huge cat person. Love cats.
Oh, yeah, well, now I do. Now I have one, and I realize that I think it loves me. I think that's the main thing. I think this cat loves me, and that's why I now love all cats. I have realized, though, that Bobby, in terms of strategy, our strategy of making a well-researched, high-quality 30-minute podcast every week is pointless. What we should be doing is filming a fish tank for 2 hours and putting that on YouTube, because they have tens of millions of views as people don't know what to do with their cats, stick that on the TV, and there's obviously adverts every 10 minutes, right? These guys are clearly making bank. Why don't we do it?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea because it doesn't work just for cats. I use it for my children as well.
I thought you played in this podcast.
Well, we were planning on talking a little bit about vaccines this evening, but we could just do the entire 30 minutes on cats.
There is actually a COVID angle with cats.
Tell me.
Yeah. The tiger at the Bronx Zoo got COVID.
No, so cats can catch coronavirus, types of it, variants of it. And remdesivir, which was one of the first drugs approved in the U.S. to treat COVID, and also was approved in Japan.
Well, that's not true. One of the first was bleach. That was one of the second.
Right. Can't forget that one. Inject the right up veins. There's a disclaimer that there's nothing I say is medical advice, right? But anyway, so remdesivir, there's there is a black market drug for cats when they get certain feline viruses that is basically the same as remdesivir, the formulation.
Huh.
Yeah. It's basically the same thing.
This will lead us nicely into a discussion about how well we should vet vaccines.
Yes, let's jump into the news.
The Mainichi Shimbun reports Japan PM Suga coached on how to use social media to connect with public. Our own JBRC Press Club correspondents have followed up on the story.
Yes, at Gva Oto tells us that a source close to Suga reports that the Prime Minister seemed uncomfortable with the words social and media and asked instead if he could refer to it as liberal democratic mouthpiece.
Also, contributor Ann Kilzer details Suga's plans to issue his next plea for Japan's populace to stay at home during an Insta Live from a Ginza steakhouse. And she suggests that if Suga wants to get ratioed that badly, he could just take a look at the percentage of positive PCR tests. That reporting in detail later in the show.
Yes, and if you'd like to join the JBRC Press Club, follow us at JBRC Pod on Twitter for next week's assignment.
We wanted to ask someone about Japan's vaccine rollout plan, but unfortunately, Vaccine Minister Kono Taro wouldn't accept our Twitter DM. Lisa, as a journalist on the Japan vaccine beat, what can you tell us about the latest developments in vaccine news?
Well, like you just mentioned, one of the latest developments is that there's been a minister assigned to be in charge of the logistics of the vaccine rollout, and that's Kono Taro. And he's very
has there. We were not aware.
Yeah, not millions of video messages, tweets, press release. He loves the attention, I think. But everyone knows Taro, Kono Taro, right? He's a very maverick guy.
I don't
loves
know
to
who
tweet.
Kono Taro is. I know who Taro Kono is. I'm not. Are we talking about the same person here?
Yes, this one is running fuse. He's got, he wants people to refer to him by the Japanese order of his name. It's like he's made a very big public
absolutely ridiculous. He really cares about where that kono goes. But English and Japanese word order is different, right? Like if you want to say kono in Japanese, you'd say kono hito. In English, you'd say this asshole when referring to him. So I think we need to be respectful of the fact that the languages are different. Anyway, look, that's just a little joke there about grammar.
Kono Taro, more like Kono Yaro.
Okay, good. Okay, so we've got some jokes in early. Let's talk about the vaccine. Does he know what he's doing?
He's not a science guy, but this is a logistics maneuver. So he's ex-defense minister, so I feel like he probably has some experience in this field of logistics. And the other thing that he's known for is he's the guy to kind of go to get things done. Like he has that reputation.
Right.
And, before this, he was, when Suga became prime minister, he was assigned to become the administrative reform minister. And, immediately in a month, he was on this war against Hanko, the stamps that you need to do on every paper document in Japan. And within like a month, he was like, I've identified 15,000 things that need Hanko, and we need to get rid of basically like 14,900 of them.
Right.
The one that you didn't need to get rid of was the form that lets you get rid of the Hanko, which you are required to Hanko.
or maybe that's how they ease the vaccine rollout. That you want the vaccine, you've got to bring your Hanko with you. I'm afraid. Maybe that's the triage.
You shouldn't even joke about that though, because they are doing that with My Number. They want
God's
everybody in the country to sign up for My Number. And I heard on the news earlier today that they're saying you'll need your My Number to get a vaccine so they can track how it's been distributed.
Goodness me. All right, well, I'll stop making jokes lest they become prophetic. But Lisa, for those who don't really know how the Japanese medical system is structured, some countries have a very decentralized system, insurance-based, loads of private clinics. Some countries like the UK or some Western European countries, have a lot of kind of top-level decision makers that can spread logistics all across the country. Across, the UK, it's through NHS trusts. Where on the scale does Japan fall? How much power does Kono actually have?
The way the vaccine rollout has been designed, from what we know so far, is basically, it is going to be carried out at a local level with the national government providing the resources. Like they'll ration out like freezers, right, and they'll ration out vaccines. But how it happens on a local level is done by the municipality. So you could be seeing several different models happening. There's going to be kind of a generic system. There's some kind of computer program called VSIS that's going to be used, I think, by all the municipalities to track the people. And the one thing I know they've said is that they're going to be mailing out like coupon cards to people to come get vaccinated. And so that's going to start basically with the elderly first.
When you say the elderly, what's the age range there when you say the elderly?
I believe it's over the age of 65.
Oh, okay. So a quarter of all the people in the country.
Yes. They'll start with healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, and then do them, and then the elderly, and then those with pre-existing conditions. Oh,
so they'll start with the 20-some healthcare workers and then go to a quarter of all the people in the country.
It's a very small compared to the amount of older people. I think they're starting with 10,000 medical workers and then expanding that slowly. But yeah. And the starting date is supposed to be end of February.
Okay, so still actually quite a long way after some other developed countries have started, and maybe we can pick up on that later. But is the infrastructure going to be kind of clinics, or are there going to be big pop-up centers? Are there going to be kind of repurposed buildings? There's a load of vacant buildings at the moment. Are we going to be seeing like maid cafes be repurposed into vaccine centers? Where are people actually going to be going to get their vaccine?
That would be a good way to hit some certain Saudi-man demographics, right? If you do the maid cafes.
Yeah, and some of them even have nurses' uniforms ready to go.
Well, in Japan, I think by law you actually need to be a doctor or nurse to pierce someone's skin with a needle, and that's a whole separate thing. But so at the local level, it's still completely up to local authorities. They could kind of contract it out to a hospital or a clinic to do it, or they could arrange it themselves where they do it in kind of a public space like a gym, and they'll set it up. So it's completely, it'll change depending on the locality you're at.
Okay.
I actually saw someone had shared on Twitter earlier today the envisioned plan for how they were going to actually administer the vaccine. And I think they had something where they plan on having somebody in and out within 3 minutes, processed and administered the vaccine within 3 minutes. And I remember thinking, like, Japan, when they want to, they can be really efficient. They can be super efficient, but I think this is another one of those instances where they forget that they'll also need to do foreigners as well, because I have never been to a hospital where there wasn't like 15 minutes of the nurses trying to decide who had to try to pronounce my name, and then another 10 minutes of the doctor practicing his English.
But you have a really easy last name, isn't it? Judo? It's quite easy to pronounce. Bobby. But yeah, the 3 minute thing, I don't know. So just today, and this is probably all over the news already, that they ran a vaccine simulation in Kawasaki City, which is just north of Tokyo as part of Kanagawa Prefecture. They did a simulation where there was like, this is what's gonna be like to have 20 elderly come in to get vaccinated. And they did it in the gymnasium of a nursing college. And but the whole purpose of it was like, oh, we need to learn because we don't know what it's actually going to be like when they vaccinate. And they had set up like waiting areas. They had a consultation room, and then the actual place where you get the vaccine, and then like a follow up area right after. But then the officials that are commenting afterwards were saying things like, oh, we didn't expect the initial consult would take so long because there are a lot of old people are really worried about the side effects and things like that. But it was quite thoughtful because they're also saying like, oh, this is just how Kawasaki is going to do it. We try to set this gym space with a lot of like simple things like temporary walls, paper signs, so that if someone wants to copy us, like they can do it very easily because you can get any of these materials anywhere temporarily. So it was very thoughtful the way they were approaching it, at least.
While it's obviously a good thing they're doing a simulation, I guess some people are going to be asking, why is Japan doing a simulation at the same time that other countries are putting actual vaccines in?
Well, for one thing, there is no vaccine has been approved in Japan.
Yeah, what's the difference in timeline with that?
Well, yeah, what's with that then?
I mean, it's a whole regulatory process, right? If the vaccines are developed by Pfizer and BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and if they don't apply for approval, there's nothing to approve. So in Japan, only Pfizer has actually applied for approval. And they did that in mid-December, and all reports kind of from local media and as well as Bloomberg's own reporting is suggesting that the approval will probably happen in mid-February, which is why you've got the end of February we'll start vaccination dates. And so, they need to go through the whole approval process.
Presumably this approval is more than just a rubber stamp. Maybe that's a bad analogy. But presumably they're doing some kind of local testing. They're doing something in labs. Why is it taking so long? Yeah.
So one thing that Japan requires is that you need to run a local clinical trial for the vaccines. And so basically, Pfizer and AstraZeneca started their trial back in the fall, actually. And so basically, for the approval, when they submit for approval, they are submitting the local trial data. So how the safety and efficacy. Basically safety data and on the Japanese local population, as well as kind of the data from their big global trials that includes like tens of thousands of people. And then and what they've submitted for emergency approval, so it is supposed to be fast tracked.
Yeah.
And so the only precedent we have to go on is that back in 2009 during the H1N1 pandemic, it took about 2 to 3 months back then to approve the vaccine for the flu back then. So it's looking around that time. People are saying mid-February. That would be about 2 months since Pfizer submitted the application.
Well, Japan might be taking longer than other countries, but I want to touch on the idea that the whole process is still super fast compared to how medicines and new drugs usually get approved. So I'm wondering, what do you think it says about not just Japan, but the various world governments and their risk assessment in terms of processing this vaccine as though it's an emergency?
I mean, I think a lot of you have said, the fact that they were able to develop this vaccine and within a year has been kind of just like a marvel of science, So, but the thing, and risk-wise, a lot of, everyone says Pfizer's and Moderna, they have an mRNA vaccine. Everyone says it's new, it's novel, but the technology itself has been in development for a while, and the idea has existed for a while. So it's not like 100% someone just thought it up one day last year, right? And so in terms, I think I'm pretty sure governments understand that, and then they are fast tracking the trial, but it's gone through the vaccine trial process. There's 3 phases, and the vaccines have completed the 3 phases. It's happened very, very fast.
Right.
This is also a public health emergency.
Yeah, I don't think there's any suggestion by serious people that the vaccines which are being approved, and same for the Oxford AstraZeneca one, that corners are being cut to approve. I think it's just that other medicines take a long time because there isn't as much money thrown at it. But I do think that there are some people who are against taking the vaccine, but I don't think they're against taking these specific vaccines because they've been rushed through. They're just generally opposed to vaccines, and no matter what regulatory hoops these vaccines went through, they'd still cross their arms. Oh no, if they cross their arms, then that gives them easy access to the upper arm. They would put their arms behind their back, whatever would prevent that needle going in their arm. So let's talk about those people.
Well, in the U.S., I mean, I know the reasons why people are anti-vaccine in the U.S. It's because Jenny McCarthy told them to be. But in Japan, what's the history behind Japan's resistance to vaccination?
So it's slightly different from the West, I think. It's kind of more rooted in how the government handled and responded to these past adverse events that were linked to vaccines, as well as kind of legal decisions that stem from that. And then that also has caused the government to kind of take an increasingly passive stance on vaccination. So this whole thing happened basically it started, I think, in the early 90s, where there was a measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, MMR, that was suspected of leading to higher incidences of aseptic meningitis. I don't think a link was ever established, but so that was kind of where the modern unease was rooted there. And then there was this other catalyst, which was a kind of a court ruling also in the early 90s that basically made the government responsible for any adverse effects from vaccines, regardless of whether there was any scientific evidence saying that of direct causality. And then that just makes the government take this increasingly passive stance. And then a year after that, the government the law was changed to basically not make vaccinations mandatory. And so I think all these kind of the government attitude changing, the law changing, it just kind of increasingly contributed to this environment where it sent a message to the Japanese people that vaccines are to be taken at your own risk, and not which is kind of against the core benefit of vaccines, which is you take a risk for the greater benefit of society. And so that's kind of where that happened. And that's kind of the modern history of it. More recently, there was an incident with the HPV vaccine, which is for cervical cancer. And so this vaccine has been proven safe and effective in basically preventing cervical cancer in women. And you're supposed to get it when you're a teenager and in your early 20s. And Japan approved it. It was going, they were inoculating, teenage girls with it. But then, some groups threw up a fuss about the side effects. And then the media, the domestic media, some of the news variety shows really, really blew it up. And it turned into this whole thing where in the end, the ministry actually ended up withdrawing its recommendation for the vaccine. You could still get it, but it was no longer kind of recommended or being pushed by the vaccine. Well, and then the vaccination rate on that inoculation went from 70% to less than 1%.
Right, and it is this kind of lack of confidence that could mean that this vaccination program for COVID may not reach critical mass. I mean, the stats for Japan, because of all the reasons that you've just explained, are pretty bleak, right? I think Bloomberg reported, I think it was you that reported, 30%, only 30% of Japanese people were confident that the vaccines were safe. So this is a big hurdle to overcome, isn't it?
There was this study done back in September by a group that looked at vaccine confidence in different countries around the world. And basically what it concluded was that, Japan had one of the lowest levels of vaccine confidence.
For some of the reasons that we've already brought up. And part of that is because, as you said, the government, when faced with the prospect of having to take responsibility for any negative things that might have come out of it, was like, instead of taking responsibility, we're just going to back away and let things be what they'll be.
While providing indemnities too, legal indemnities to the manufacturers.
So that is something that's been promised. And actually, in this case, for the COVID vaccine, I think they're called vaccine injury compensation schemes. And actually, a lot of vaccine advocates promote them because if you don't make this promise, there would never be any incentive for drug makers to make vaccines.
Mm.
Right.
Because they're they're not very profitable. You need to make a lot of investment into manufacturing, into the development before you know if they work at all. And so something like that. I think the idea for Japan when they said, we're going to try to cover any, we'll cover any legal fees and issues that arise from side effects related to the COVID vaccine. Like that was almost done to help cut the deals it has with the vaccine makers to guarantee supply.
Got it.
Speaking of the COVID vaccine specifically, it would be a little bit disingenuous of me to go the whole show pretending that I have looked into how the mRNA vaccine actually works. So can you give us like a little bit of a rundown of how this differs from other vaccines, like flu vaccines, or what is this relatively new technology? How does it work differently from other vaccines?
Yes. And which version of Windows gets pre-installed?
That's hopefully not ME. But it's actually quite simple. I mean, I'm not actually completely 100% sure how flu vaccines work, and there's many different types. But traditionally, a vaccine is a weakened virus. They introduce a weakened virus into your body, and your body makes antibodies against it, and then you get immunity. So it's and then
the point with all kinds of vaccines is to get your body accustomed to it and to get them to build antibodies for it, right?
Yes. But, it's how do you get your body to build antibodies against something is you introduce the foreign, thing. And so traditionally that's what a traditional vaccine does. This mRNA vaccine, how it works is, so mRNA is just messenger RNA. There are instructions to your cells to make certain types of protein. And so the mRNA vaccine, it carries instructions to make the spike protein found on the coronavirus.
Okay.
And that's the protein that the virus uses to attach to cells and enter them and replicate. And so when the mRNA enters your body, it makes these spike proteins, and then your body senses it and starts creating antibodies against it. But actually, the actual virus isn't actually in your body; it's just the spike protein.
And it teaches your body's cells to build that itself?
Yes. So the mRNA is giving instructions to your cells to start manufacturing the coronavirus spike protein. And then when that happens, your body senses like, this strange thing is in the body, and they'll start creating antibodies against it.
But the spike protein itself is not harmful enough to do damage. It's just something that also exists in the coronavirus.
Yeah, it's the outer shell of the coronavirus.
Okay.
So it's not an actual virus. It doesn't, it won't infiltrate your cells and start replicating or anything.
But it has enough coronavirus identifying marks in it so that when the actual coronavirus gets in, your body will know that and have the antibodies to attack it. Okay, so basically you're teaching the body to make something on its own so it can recognize that and know how to take it apart. This is actually like something I do in my parenting. I've taught my kids to play this game where they can make any rule that they want and I have to follow it as long as they can make up some super crazy, totally random, and clearly invented reasons that I have to follow their rule. That way, if in the future anyone ever gives them a Bible, they'll be like, oh, right, this game.
Hey, thanks very much for listening to this episode 69, nice, of Japan by River Cruise. Bob is rolling his eyes. Don't forget, if you would like to sign up to our mailing list, he told me not to do it, so that's why I did it. If you'd like to sign up to our mailing list, then you can do so at japanbyrivercruise.com, where you get all the best bits from the show in your inbox once a month.
I apologize on behalf of us to our guest this week, Lisa Du. Thank you for joining us. Anything else we can be on the lookout for from you?
Yes, we've just put out this piece that I helped edit on how Japanese politicians, like Prime Minister Suga, has a lot of difficulty communicating kind of the risks of COVID to the youth and the risks of them potentially spreading it. So maybe he could take a read of that too and take away some more social media lessons if he needs. Otherwise, thanks again for having me on.
Very cool. We'll check it out. And thank you all for listening. As always, we will see you next week. And Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was great.